Hello. So I've been thinking about what is our spiritual practice, and I think spiritual practice is a practice of working with one's own mind. Would people agree with that? Yeah. But what does this mean, working with one's own mind? It's a simple statement, but it can mean many things, and it can take many forms. Generally, it means confronting them and countering the mental afflictions and cultivating virtuous qualities. And in order to know, in order to do that, we have to know what those are. So we have to study and reflect and meditate on the Buddhist teachings, so that we know what's non-virtuous and what's virtuous, what practices help us to develop virtuous qualities, and what practices help us to counter the mental afflictions. Um, what brings happiness and what brings suffering, and what to practice, what to abandon. Also, we have to learn to be aware of our body, our speech, and especially our mind. The point of studying is not so that we can develop a identity as a scholar, but to develop the ability to transform one's own mind. That's why the Buddha taught, so that we could use those for that purpose. So we could develop a lot of intellectual understanding, but if we lack an awareness of our mind, we won't be able to apply the knowledge to transform our minds. We need to understand what the mind is, how it works, how it changes moment to moment, how it changes over long periods of time, and what it's doing at this very moment. And, well, truthfully, despite having received many teachings, we often find ourselves acting in ways that show that on some level, we're still confused about what brings happiness and what causes suffering. We can see this in ourselves and we can see it in others. Although we want to be happy and avoid suffering, and although we've been taught what to practice and what to abandon, we are habituated to the afflictions that continue to create suffering for ourselves and others. So we need to study and we need to develop introspective awareness. We need to practice watching our minds, not just on the cushion, although that's great and very necessary for sure. Um, we need to be aware of our minds throughout the day. And practice is the word here. Practice watching our mind, habituating ourselves to maintaining an awareness of our thoughts, our moods. What is the flavor of my mind right now? Is your mind grumpy? Is it buzzy and excited, depressed or melancholy, peaceful and content, restless or distracted? If we put effort into watching our mind, we can develop the ability to see trouble when it arises, um, when it is arising, and when it's about to arise. It's one thing to look back at a difficult interchange with someone and, after calming our mind down, think, oh, I overreacted, or that's not how I wanted to act. And it's another to see the reaction coming up and be able to turn it around with an antidote. And this takes practice. Practicing the first thing, the reflecting later method, it's helpful, and it can be a step towards developing the other more powerful, effective method of being able to steer your mind within the moment. And we need to meditate on the antidotes to the afflictions until we are so familiar with them that they arise easily, that we're able to bring them up in the heat of the moment. One of the antidotes to anger that I find most effective is to try to empathize with the other person, to try and recognize their suffering, um, and their aspiration to be happy and avoid suffering. And I also think about how it feels for myself to be under the power of the afflictions, and for the other person. I think about that so that I can see if I'm up against somebody that I feel or I view as being real afflicted, I can see that they are suffering. And I think about my own aspiration to overcome my afflictions and to keep a stable attitude. A practitioner needs to be able to keep a stable mind in the face of difficult situations. Things come up, and we will be happier if we meet situations with a stable mind. Things are going to come up. Gaelic Rinpoche, in his book, How the Mind Works, says, a spiritually strong person will not get swung around by incidents in life. Sadness will come today because that is part of life and will be followed by joy tomorrow. If you have some wonderful joy today, that is great, but don't be so overwhelmed by it because it will be followed by sadness and downfalls later. This is our life. We need to be stable in our minds to be able to deal with the sadness and joy of life. We need that stability not only with the events in our life, but in order to deal with relationships and friendships. Too many emotional swings are not necessarily great. And as samsaric beings, under the power of karma and afflictions, we will have negative mental states arise. We will have our minds spinning stories and projecting things. We will have mood swings. If we can work with our minds and practice the Buddha's teachings, we can lessen the intensity of these ups and downs. We can question our thoughts and our reactions to them and to the external phenomena. I started with talking about working with one's own mind, and there's a quote from the Mahayana Sutra, the Exalted Wisdom Going Beyond, where the Buddha says, since understanding the mind is the cause of wisdom, they should thoroughly cultivate the attitude of not looking for Buddhahood elsewhere. And so often, maybe most of the time really, we get caught up in thinking we'll be happy if we can just change the external situation. This is wrong. We know it's wrong. We know the Buddha said it's wrong. But it still comes up in our attitude and our behavior. My spiritual practice is to work on my own mind. And if I'm trying to change others, I'm not really practicing what the Buddha taught. In the 50th verse of the Dhammapada, the Buddha said, regard neither the discrepancies of others, nor what others have done or left undone, but only what one has done oneself or left undone. And I memorized this quite a while ago, and I still remember it because I go back to it a lot. I don't think the Buddha said this just to keep us from being obnoxious and annoying to others, but to teach us what to abandon if we want to be happy. I think all the things the Buddha taught are there for us to work with our own minds. And this can be hard. It's something I struggle with, trying not to let myself be annoyed by others' behavior or concerned with how others live their lives or what they think. I mean, it's good to develop a heartfelt concern for others, and developing great compassion and bodhicitta will transform our minds. But trying to change others' behavior or how they think is not necessary. We can't do that, and it's not necessarily beneficial to try. The best thing we can do for the benefit of all sentient beings is to practice the Dharma, to transform our own minds. If we want to be happy, we need to develop the ability to be happy as an internal quality. We have the resources to do this. We can spend our time trying to change external things, chase after what we think will make us happy, and not achieve happiness, even though we have everything we need to be happy. Or we can put our energy where it will do the most good, into the practice of transforming our own minds. There's a quote I like, I'm not sure where it's from, but it says, there is much contentment for those who are easily content. And so I also think about this with compassion, that compassion is an internal quality. It's not just like, oh, I have compassion for this person and not for that. We want to develop compassion so that it arises in situations when they're suffering, regardless of the object. So much of what we do is with our internal mind, internal work.